the latest report over at scoopb.com. NBA insider Brandon Scoopy Robinson reports about the potential of Bob Meyer and the 76ers. And the NBA insider Scoopy, of course, Scoopy Radio, scoopy.com. Of course, Scoopy Radio, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube. I mean, let's be realistic. I mean, you know this, my friend. I mean, people can find content everywhere now. So they just type in Scoopy. They're going to find that content. Right? How you doing today, my friend?
My friend, I am doing good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you jumping on. And, you and I were talking over the weekend about how, this Bob Myers story is fascinating because of not just who he is, but the trajectory of this Sixers season. And that's kind of where I want to start with you. In your mind, do you think we'd even be talking about Bob Myers right now if this Sixers season went differently?
That's a slippery slope, but I will say that Bob Myers' relationship with Josh Harris, the majority owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, is interesting because of Bob Myers' role as a consultant with the Washington Commanders, where he is a consultant. And I'll just tell you, Bob Myers is a guy that knows everybody. He's very well connected, very well sourced, and very well respected. And this is something that came across my desk a couple of weeks ago. I got a phone call by a very respected league fixture. Called me about 2 a.m. and said, Bob Myers and the Sixers do have mutual interest. And so then as that person was talking to me, I said to them, well, what about Brooklyn? Because I had heard some things about Brooklyn, particularly with Sean Marks and just the direction of the team. And they said, yeah, that's interesting. That's cute. But I see Philadelphia growing steam as the season goes along. And I remember tweeting it last Friday, the article that I had written. And maybe 20 minutes later, some of my other colleagues had broken a story about Joel Embiid meeting with Josh Harris about just his future of the season and him ultimately shutting it down. And so, it gained some steam over the weekend. But everyone that I've spoken with since then, even reaching out to my contacts over in Phoenix, they don't have the same interest in Bob Myers as the 76ers do. And he has an easy key to open the door because of his relationship with Josh Harris.
Bob Harris, we got to remind people, has a very interesting background because it's not like the man worked in the NBA his entire life in terms of a front office. He did work as an agent, for a time before he became the Warriors GM. So he does bring a very interesting perspective that I'm just going back in my own memory bank. I don't think Philadelphia has had that kind of person involved in the organization in many years.
No, and that's kind of the way the direction of today's general manager in the NBA is going. A lot of guys who are once GMs, or rather who are now GMs, once agents, they're assuming these roles. And that's, I've broken this down. That's kind of where you saw Nico Harris with the Dallas Mavericks and his connectivity. Similarly with Rob Pelinka, who was the general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers. Nico comes from a sneaker background, having worked as an executive for years with Nike, and then Rob Pelinka ultimately being Kobe Bryant's agent, also working with James Harden over at Landmark. And ultimately, those guys have a deeper-rooted relationship, and that's how the conversation really went to deep talks with the Luka and Anthony Davis trade. To kind of go back to your point just about Bob Myers, he does come from an agent background, and is credited as being the architect for that championship Golden State Warriors team, although I still do give credit where credit is due to some of the other fixtures in the Golden State Warriors, namely the coach before Steve Kerr and Mark Jackson, who, got those guys early, Draymond, as well as, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, who's now a member of the Mavs. But, I think that is the way the direction of the situation is going. You go to parties. I go to certain parties during All-Star Weekend or during Summer League, and it is definitely a consortium of people who have worked in various roles within the National Basketball Association. And Bob Myers definitely has been on both the negotiating side as well as working with star players, and as well as working in a front office and dealing with team owners and more.
Talking with NBA insider Brandon Scoop B Robinson at Scoop B on the Twitter X platform as well as on Instagram. Check out Scoop B Radio on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If Bob Myers were to come to the Sixers, what do you believe is a skill or something that he does well that you observed during his time in Golden State that would be valuable to an organization, whether it be the Sixers or the Nets or whoever? Like, what is something that Bob Myers brings to the table?
Connectivity and relatability to today's player. You're around a lot of NBA players, and they sniff you out within the first 5 seconds. Even top prospects that are going to the draft, they sniff you out. You're treated like kings or queens in your respective sport, and you know who the kingmakers and who has say and who does what they're told. I think winning championships, particularly on such a high-profile team like the Golden State Warriors, has its perks. To me, in today's NBA, the Golden State Warriors still are the gold standard for winning in the same way that the Chicago Bulls were in the 90s with Michael, Scottie, Dennis Rodman, and whatever iteration of teams that you looked at during those 6 championships under head coach Phil Jackson. I think Bob Myers is revered in a way that's on the right side of history, that when you looked at The Last Dance with the Bulls, their GM wasn't looked at the same way. And I do think that Bob Myers had the advantage of not sinking down with the ship or being the bad guy when it was perceived that the ship was sinking, when ultimately Klay Thompson left, and now they have Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry, and there's new life alongside Draymond Green. But I think connectivity is the biggest portion there for Bob Myers. And I also think that having television experience on ESPN currently, sitting next to the Stephen A's, the Malika Andrews, the Kendrick Perkins, and Shams Charania, and all those guys and lady, I think has its perks there. So it keeps you in constant repetition of focus. Kind of similarly, in my druthers, that Bill Belichick had at ESPN before ultimately taking the job at North Carolina as their new head football coach there.
My mind was going to, I remember the years that Steve Kerr was calling games for TNT. And, you could argue that, being involved in the sport, but getting a fresh set of eyes on it can help anybody. Getting a fresh perspective on anything can help.
I've spoken to Steve Kerr over the years about that. And one of the things that Coach Kerr shared with me was not just the decision-making processes that I believe at the time he was an executive with the Phoenix Suns and then transitioned into television at TNT or vice versa. But one of the things that I found interesting in talking with Steve Kerr about that was the things that you don't think have anything to do with basketball that do. So not only was he in charge of making decisions about personnel, he also was communicating with vendors about food and drinks. You don't think about that with Steve Kerr. You think about hitting three-point shots as a member of the championship Bulls, the championship San Antonio Spurs, but he's also charged with communicating with the purchasing order folks, whoever that may be, whether the right amount of popcorn is in the concession stands, whether the right jerseys that, players or the merchandising that are being sold. So, you're looking at that. It's more to it than just the decision-making process of who goes where and playing golf with your counterparts on other respective teams to get the best possible deal. Bob Myers, to me, is a schmoozer, but he's effective in that way. I also think that one of the things that was interesting about Bob Myers over the years before he ultimately decided to go into television at ESPN, it is of my understanding that his wife is from Southern California. And so when he ultimately made the decision to do TV, ESPN studios are right in the TLA, downtown LA. And so he's able to kind of happy wife, happy life, if you will. And so I think, those are the decisions you're making, not just about career, but about your family when deciding that's what you want to do in Los Angeles. As it relates to the Los Angeles Lakers, they have a job filled in with Rob Pelinka, who made a trade to get Luka Doncic, a very good trade. So I know that job is not available, but I know that in Philadelphia, it's not currently available. But based upon the record, it'll be interesting to see what happens with both Daryl Morey and Elton Brand, and whether he'll outright take the GM or the president of basketball operations role, or he'll serve in a similar consulting capacity that he was doing with the Washington Commanders.
By the way, before I let that totally slip away, it was at Scoop B back in August of last year was the first person I saw talk about the possibility of Luka Doncic being traded to the Lakers. So if you're not following Brendan Scoop B Robinson on social media, you guys are missing out. I'm just putting it out there. But back to your other point about the Sixers, before I let you go, this has been a rough year for Philadelphia. There's a lot of expectations coming into the year. And, I know that, your primary function is as a content creator and NBA insider and everything, but I know you're also at heart a diehard basketball fan. You love the game. So for you, what has been the most disappointing aspect of this Sixers season for someone like yourself?
I think the expectations that the Sixers were going to dominate the Eastern Conference, and it gave you an alternative to the Boston Celtics and an alternative to the New York Knicks. And what we thought the Sixers could be are ultimately what the Cleveland Cavaliers have become consistently all season, top to bottom. Kenny Atkinson and his team are playing inspiring basketball. And I think in a world where we constantly pay attention to big markets, it is encouraging to see a Cleveland team do their thing in the Eastern Conference, and comparatively in the West to see Oklahoma be consistent in the same vein. For Philadelphia, I think health from the beginning. I mean, whether we're talking about Paul George being injured in the preseason, whether we're talking about Joel Embiid being hurt, and the whole conversation about back-to-backs, and then the unfortunate altercation with Joel and another member of the press, and then now seeing Tyrese Maxey being out in back-to-back games. Like, I think the encouraging part about it is that you are seeing other guys step up, whether that be one in Andre Drummond, whether that be Kelly Oubre, who's been playing well. I think it even the 44 points the other night against the Golden State Warriors in a win. I'm so mad that he didn't hit those 6 free throws. I was pissed. My uncle would say I was pissed off beyond all levels of pissivity. I was mad because I wanted that 50 burger. But it's just injuries and just silly stuff that has been frustrating, this season for the 76ers. And, now we're talking potential lottery. You're looking at the names that are out there, whether that's, Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey of Rutgers University, who I've watched quite a bit and developed a rapport with this season, or, if that's, ultimately the young man from Duke that is also doing this thing. I think there's a lot of talent out there, but we should be talking about this with the 76ers. We should be talking, playoff run, championship run, not play-in.
Yeah, absolutely. He is NBA insider Brandon Scoop B Robinson. Just type in Scoop B on all the social media platforms, Twitter, X, Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Get the alerts from all the podcasting platforms. And, of course, he joined us here on 97.3 ESPN. My friend, I appreciate you jumping on and giving us some of your insights.
Thank you, as always, and thank you for the opportunity to be myself.
Anytime, my friend. Take care of yourself, all right?
All right, you too.